What's up, everybody? It's Caleb from thebookflipper.com. This is a bit of a State of the Union and State of the State address. So this will be interesting. A lot going on. We're going to wait and let people jump in. This will be recorded. If you have to duck out, I know we are also competing with the NFL draft tonight. It's not that exciting. They're going to be on the clock most of the night and speculating. So if you just want to have your phone up and just get some ESPN updates as the picks come in. I don't care. I'm a Lions fan. We really don't do a lot of anything, so I'm just kind of used to disappointment. So I'm not terribly invested in the draft. If you guys want to comment some of the picks as it goes on, feel free. That'll be kind of fun. So again, I see a bunch of people jumping in. If you are here, say hello. Matthew's here. Thanks for jumping on, Matthew. I know you had some family stuff going on tonight unexpectedly, so appreciate you jumping in as well. Mike Kreider, congrats on beating Caleb's bracket, Matthew. Actually, we need to figure out who won the bracket challenge in the book flipper community for the NCAA. We've got some rewards to give out, so I haven't forgotten. There have just been some distractions, which we'll get into. So if you're watching, say hello. Let us know where you're calling in from or participating, watching from. We got Paul from Connecticut, Aaron Wayman, Brad Morgan, yo. He's from the South. I didn't know they talked like that. We got Eric, Ron Evans, Facebook, use there. That joke still lives on. Terry Gray, what's up? Michael Daly, the Zion Phil. So a bunch of people. Thanks for watching. If you guys do get a chance, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe. That does help us reach more people. All right. That's enough of my little shebang. I've been a bit quiet lately trying to figure out, and I've been talking to several of you, chatting, calling, Instagramming, all of the things, all the social medias. A lot of changes going on. We're going to try and dissect them. I'm going to really try and break down what we know about these restock limits. So if you guys didn't know, I actually went and saw one of our bulk software clients over the weekend and popped in there and said, hey, what's going on? We were just chit-chatting. It was late at night. I got in late from my flight. And we were just sitting down and just saying goodnight, whatever. And he was, tucking me into his guest bedroom, which was nice. So you know who you are. Appreciate the hospitality. And I said, hey, how are you guys reacting to this news? And he goes, what news? And I said, uh-oh, you didn't hear about the restock limits? He goes, nope. And so that led to an interesting discussion. So I feel bad. I'm sorry to break the bad news. For those of you that don't know, you can just pretend you didn't hear it from me and you heard it somewhere else on Facebook. So we'll jump into what it is. I've got a little bit of an agenda. Looks like 93 of you on here already, which is a little higher than normal. So I know it's some interesting times, and we'll get into it. So for anybody that I've been chatting with, you know who you are. I'll try and give some kudos and props a little bit as we go through the story. So Latin Pickers, Christian, really appreciate some of your comments and insights. Dave from Atlanta, you know who you are. There's a lot of Daves out there, but Dave was really insightful. James from Texas, really appreciate some of your comments. We'll get to that. They're pretty good as well. Mike, of course, in California, and a whole bunch of other guys and gals. So I know I'm missing some people, but if you helped me figure this out, I'm going to try and communicate what's going on, and we'll do our best to figure out a game plan forward. The old joke is the only constant is change in this business. And it feels like Amazon changes the rules, changes the fees, changes something of substance every couple of months. It seems like it's once or twice a year. There's some big earth shattering news. We get some people that just quit and drop out. Some people kind of be firm and say, hey, we're going to dig in. We're going to build on this firm foundation. We're not going anywhere. We're figuring it out. So we're going to talk through what those mean for you. We're doing our best with limited information, typical Amazon format. They didn't tell us a whole lot of what's going on. Side note, I think Amazon was reporting earnings tonight. So if you happen to check that out, I'm really curious where they landed. I know several of you are day traders as well. So Chad Skyle says hello. Heck V37 from North Carolina. Mark Overman from Arkansas. Sherry White. Nate from Montana. What's up, buddy? Victor from California. Heather from Texas. Mert Khan. Doesn't say where, but we know where you're from. Laura says, thanks for talking about this. Alfredo from Illinois. So thanks, everybody, for being on here. It is crazy times. And Mike Kreider wanted me to throw out a little shout out to Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey. But tonight is just a golfing moment. It'll show up a little too reflective. Try and block some of that light. Anyway, I got a golf logo on here. And we're just going to drink water and talk about this. So State of the Union, here's what we know. We'll jump into this. I'm going to talk for a bit, as I'm prone to do, and I've got a few little notes, and I'll draw on the screen and try and make some sense of some things. we're going to explain a little bit. So these restock limits came out Thursday night. I think Kyle Preston was the first guy to reach out and said, hey, I'm on the phone with seller support. Well, what's going on? I said, maybe it's just your account. Fingers crossed. Hopefully nothing's going on. And unfortunately, here we are. Rob, what's up? I've been ignoring Rob all day. He loves it when I ignore him. So I guess he had to jump onto the live stream. So that's great. So here's what's going on. Amazon sellers pretty much just got evicted. And it's not that bad, but we'll get into it. So it's a little bit of a tongue in cheek, a little bit of a joke potentially. These are no laughing times. But if you rely 100% on FBA, the game has changed. For some of you, quite a bit. For some of you, not as much. We'll kind of walk through what it is. So what's our agenda tonight? We're going to talk about what on earth is going on. We're going to try and dig into what we've discovered. And again, I've figured this out from talking to many of you. So I really appreciate those who did jump on the phone, texting, calling, etc. How did we get here? What's Amazon up to? What we don't know. So there still is a lot of speculation. I know some of you like to day trade or make comments or try and figure stuff out. And maybe we're not going to get too speculative, but I'll share a couple of my thoughts and some of your thoughts as well on maybe some guesses. But there's some things we still don't know, and that's what we're going to figure out together. So we'll keep these calls going. This will be on YouTube. This will be on the Facebook group. We'll keep these going as long as we need to make sure that everybody has the ammunition to move forward effectively as the game has changed a bit. And then really importantly, how do we move forward based on some of that information? So here we go. These are restock limits. They just popped up. These are brand new. Again, Thursday night, they popped up. We saw some chatter in the groups and then started reaching out and figuring out what was going on. Here's what it looked like at first. So many of you know there's inventory limits, and most people have unlimited inventory. It's tied to IPI. I'll get into a little bit of a history lesson for those of you that are newer. But what happened is basically when we started with Amazon, everybody had, you could send in up to 5,000 units of FBA. The best sellers, the guys that were moving a good chunk of inventory, and I think that metric back in the day was 8% of your inventory a week, so just over 1% a day. 8% of your inventory a week for 9 weeks in a row allowed you to request an inventory upgrade. It would go up 60% every 9 weeks, I believe. It was either 9% every 8 weeks or 8% every 9 weeks, I forget, but it was 8 and 9. And if you hit those metrics every week for 8 or 9 consecutive weeks, you could request a storage limit increase. And this was several years ago. This has not been the way it's worked for a while. So you could go from 5,000 units, you get 60% increase, it goes to 8,000. Here's where it got interesting. It was 60% on top of that new limit. So if you hit the metrics again and showed Amazon that you sold a lot of inventory, your storage would go from 8,000 to 13,600 and then 21 or 22,000. And then, it just grew exponentially. So that kind of was the game, was to send in really fast moving inventory as booksellers, because our books don't tend to sell as quickly as that, and raise your limits. Well, recently, and again, I'll get to the history in just a second, Amazon kind of threw us a bone. They said, hey, we'll just give you unlimited storage as long as your metrics, and the way they measured that was IPI, or Inventory Performance Index. As long as your IPI was high enough and you're a good seller, you get the pat of approval from Mr. Bezos himself, you can just have unlimited storage. And so that was nice. This 5,000 unit limit kind of went away. And as long as you were selling a reasonable amount, it wasn't terribly difficult to keep your IPI above 500 or 450, or, it's a moving target, and you had unlimited storage. Well, on Thursday night, Amazon said, hey, that's cool. You can still have unlimited storage. Good for you. But we're adding this new layer on top, which is called restock limits. Now, this used to apply to individual ASINs. So if you sold, and an ASIN is just fancy Amazon term for stock keeping unit or a SKU. If you were a private label seller and wanted to order 1,000 pair of sunglasses and get those shipped in, you could do that. But if you weren't selling enough and Amazon basically wanted you to be limited to a few months of supply at any given time, you couldn't just dump 1,000 pair of sunglasses in their facility, because they didn't want to be in the storage business. And this is going to be the theme that pops up over and over and over again. Amazon does not want to be in the storage business. Amazon wants to be in the selling business. And if we're going to participate in their platform, we need to be focused on selling. Now, it is fulfilled by Amazon, but the emphasis is that it's getting fulfilled and it's not storage by Amazon. And that's really the theme, if we had to boil this down into a nutshell. So what happens on Thursday night is this new category came up, and a couple theories. We'll get into speculation in a little bit, but restock limits, it's different than inventory limits. So many of you still have full or unlimited inventory or storage. However, these restock limits are a new kind of tranche or layer on top, but it's not the cake kind of layer where it's a good layer, the more the better. This is kind of a pernicious, evil, insidious type of cake layer, if you will. So, and again, I don't know if this is because it's going to be temporary. I'm not going to speculate as to that, and maybe they'll pull it away and the inventory limits will reign supreme. Or if this is their way and their lawyers said, hey, you can't take away the unlimited storage after you promised it to people for X amount of time. And so Amazon's like, cool, we're not taking away unlimited storage. You have every right to unlimited storage. But restock limits now apply. And the email was a little bit sneaky. It came off guard. It was late at night Thursday, I think well after business hours. And it said, hey, remember these ASIN exemptions where you couldn't send 1,000 of a slow moving product to us? And as booksellers, we don't care because we don't have 1,000, people. Insidious cake, somebody just commented, that would make a great little meme and a shirt, just saying. Someone put that together, I'll buy it. They popped in and said, hey, these restock limits, they kind of made it seem like they're doing us a favor. They said these restock limits don't just apply to the ASIN level. They're just going to apply to the storage size. So books are pretty much all standard size storage. Some are oversized, but the majority, 98, 99% of books are standard size storage. And they said these limits, these restock limits now apply there, which, to your whole broad category, which that's fine. Like, we have a lot of books in inventory. These are not my metrics, but I'm kind of similar in that ballpark. We've got about, 12-ish thousand books in inventory, FBA. And Amazon said, cool. And so everybody kind of popped up on Thursday night into Friday morning and said, you now have a restock limit. And for most people, not everybody, but most people, wherever their inventory level was, the restock limit was just a little bit higher. So for us, again, these aren't our specific numbers. For us, we only had a maximum shipment quantity of about 800. Now, our business, we ship 2 pallets at a time. That's the cheapest way for us. We get really good economies of scale by doing that. We ship 2 skids at a time. And that happens every, 10 to 14 days. We'll ship into, roughly 1,800 to 2,000 books. Well, I can only ship in 800 books now as of Thursday night, which means I can barely send 1 full pallet. All right, so that's interesting. And from talking to others of you and kind of posting questions on the groups, it was, well, most people were, their inventory level was here and the restock limit was here, which is kind of Amazon's way of saying, get out of my warehouse. We're full. We're full up. We don't have any space. So I'll get into why I think that happens. It got a little bit worse 2 days ago. Today's Thursday, Tuesday afternoon, when IPI updated a day later than normal, which is kind of a red flag. IPI normally updates on Monday, I believe, evenings. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but it usually updates Mondays. It updated on Tuesday, and all of a sudden, a lot of you that had your inventory here and your restock limit here, the restock limit all of a sudden went down. So the question was, what is this based off of? At first, it seemed like the rich were going to get richer. If you had a ton of inventory, even if it was bad inventory, Amazon said, hey, that's cool. It's in here. We'll let it fly. And you can kind of keep your inventory levels, roughly where they're at, which is cool if you've been in the game for a while. And if you haven't, if you're just starting out, it's kind of a slap in the face of, hey, we don't really need you. Mike, thanks for spot checking me. He says Monday, super early morning PST. So Pacific Standard, normally IPI gets updated Monday morning. This week it didn't, which was kind of a, uh-oh, what's going on? And it actually updated on Tuesday. I'm going to make sure my computer does not die on me. And let me plug this back in a second. I only have so many ports on the old MacBook. Let me change my mic. We're going to go to this. Hang on, bear with me 1 second. Well, that won't work either. Anyway, I'll get the notes up here. Let me finish this initial conversation, and then we'll switch more to chatting, and I'll go that way. So for those of you that didn't have a huge limit, let's say you only had a couple units. I found someone that has 1 unit in FBA. The good news is it looks like the minimum limit is 1,000. So even if you're just starting out in the game, the book game, I know some people don't like it when I call it that. It's a business, but it's also a game. People that are just starting out, looks like the minimum utilization level we've seen. You can comment if you've seen anything lower, is 1,000. So everybody gets 1,000. It used to be 5,000. Now it's 1,000. And people that were a little bit further along, it seemed to be tied to what your level of inventory was. Well, we went through a few things. Here's a couple things again. You can see your IPI. If you guys want to see this, you can go to Manage Inventory, then click on Inventory Dashboard. You can kind of see these metrics. You'll see IPI, which again used to be the metric, and 4 pieces play into IPI. Excess inventory percentage, FBA sell-through, stranded inventory percentage, and FBA in stock rate. And really, we don't know exactly. We're trying to guess, but lots of people smarter than me figured out that the FBA sell-through, and this is percentage per day, so this is 0.5. This is not a very good seller in this case. 0.5% a day is what's selling. And if you click through on that, you'll see that Amazon tells you, you can click show more details on that. They'll show you that that's really poor. Fair is 1 to 2% a day, which as booksellers, that's kind of on the upper end where most of us are going to live. Good or higher is 2% a day, which I just haven't seen really in the book world. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe you're all doing it wrong. It's very hard to keep consistently well over 1 or into the close 1%. Let me get my computer plugged back in here. All right, we're going to continue noteless in Seattle. There we go. All right. So anyway, that's kind of where we got to. So we started asking the question, and it seemed like, where did these restock limits come from? Was it just Bezos holding his finger up in the wind and going, yep, that's our new limits? What it seemed originally was that it's based on what you had in inventory. Upon further inspection, and Latin Pickers kind of helped figure it out, and then James Applegate as well from Texas. Shout out to James. We did an awesome fishing trip together. That was great. I'm not a fisherman, and we had a blast. It was about as redneck as you can get. We had an awesome time. But he essentially called out, he's got a special Amazon rep. They're fancy. I think they pay a fee to have somebody they can call. And basically the information that was communicated back to James was, we were caught off guard by this too. This wasn't necessarily planned, or we weren't told about it. There's very little details, and basically the limits came in. It was essentially, it's not exact, but it's essentially what your average inventory sold in the last 3 months is. So if you want to pull up on your Amazon seller app, you can do it right now. Go ahead and pull it up. And if you look at year-to-date sales, I know we're most of the way through April, so we're technically 4 months in. But if you look at year-to-date sales, they are going to be roughly equal. Your FBA units sold is going to be roughly equal to your restock limits. Okay, so that's what it is. And James's rep, from what he was telling me, and if I'm not supposed to be sharing this, sorry, I'm sharing it anyway. Let me lower this light a little bit. It's washing me out. There we go. James's rep essentially said, we want you to basically be carrying a 3-month supply of inventory. And if you're not selling your inventory every 3 months, if it's not 100% turn, then we are going to cripple you a little bit. So that is essentially, and if you guys want to comment, is what you can do. Comment below and see if that makes sense. Pull up your FBA units sold year to date. You can just do it right on your seller app. It's pretty easy. You can change it to year to date. You can change it to units, and comment and see how close that is to your restock limit. It should be ballpark. And for those of you that have sold way under 1,000 units this year, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe most of you are going to be capped at 1,000. All right. So let's go into the history lesson before we get to the fun part of speculation. How did we get here? So FBA did not always exist. Fulfillment by Amazon didn't. If you guys want some cool stories, go check out Reezy Resells channel. He was one of the original, the OGs into the game. Bill Martlink from Sell Back Your Book also has some great history lessons. Pick his brain, buy him a beer, buy him some coffee, say hello, get some really cool data from him. But when FBA first came out, Amazon had trouble conniving or convincing or roping sellers into doing it. Why would they take their inventory that was in their possession, send it into Amazon and say, I'm going to trust you to fulfill this? Prime was not really a thing. Amazon sold Prime, but that was basically it. And Amazon, they had the foresight to say people are going to want things quickly, instant gratification, right? And so Amazon said, we need to convince sellers to help balance this out. And back then, sellers were a very small chunk of the Amazon ecosystem. Flash forward to today, third-party sellers make up over half. I think it's pushing 60% of all the items sold on Amazon now. Amazon's a platform, and we are more than responsible for half of all the sales, which is great. So pat yourself on the back. We've all made Amazon stock go very, very high. I'm going to pause a second, seeing some numbers come in. Derek Steinmetz says, I'm off by a couple hundred on year-to-date units, but pretty close. Josh Davis says year-to-date sold 6,200. Limit is 7,200. Amy Dennis says 600 item difference. So most of you, that kind of seems to fit the bill. So we'll get to speculations in a minute, but it's roughly a 3-month supply or 90-day supply of inventory. So when Amazon tried to convince FBA sellers to get in on the game, here's what they did. They reached out to a lot of their heavy hitters and said, hey, we want you to send your stuff into our warehouses. We're going to incentivize you to do this. And the way they did it is the fees were tiny. Every year we complain about the fees growing and growing and growing. Well, how, in an economic situation, do you convince people to come in on the supply side? You incentivize them. You give them tax rebates. You give them fee rebates. So back in the day, and from Reezy's comments, I was not selling that long ago as an FBA seller. Basically, you could sell a $4 book. Back then, it was a penny was the floor price you could sell for books. Shipping was always, for merchant fulfilled, $3.99. So the floor price of a book was $4. That was as cheap as it got. A penny book, you've heard that phrase, plus $3.99 shipping was $4. What happened was FBA sellers could now go in, and back then you could sell a $4 FBA book. In fact, you could undercut merchant fulfilled sellers and come in at $3.99 with free shipping. You would then be the cheapest price. Now, not everybody did that, but you could. And from talking to Reezy, you could make a little over $1, like $1.30, somewhere in that ballpark, on a $4 book. Now, those of us that are in the game now laugh at that, because selling a $4 FBA book, we'd lose $2 or $3 depending on the weight of the book. But back then, Amazon wanted sellers into the game. And so they said, we want to be the everything store. If someone comes to Amazon and wants to buy a book, we want to have it on our shelves. We want to be able to fulfill it within 2 days, some days less, and be able to take care of our customers. And so what they did is they said, we want one of everything on our shelves. And so they incentivize FBA sellers to switch over and get into the FBA game. And it worked. Lots of people got into it. They got some, I hate the word guru, but we got a lot of great people that share information, in our book world. That's Reezy, that's Steve Rakin, that's Avery Romer, Hayden Aquilon's kind of moving into that space as well, David Chung. We've got a lot of industry leaders that are sharing. Matt Adolph, I'm going to forget some names, Katie Reeds, but a lot of people have been sharing that information. John Muscarello, lots of y'all, Latin pickers, you know who you are. But they were sharing that information. A lot of FBA sellers got in on it. So every year, Amazon says, well, we're getting more and more sellers. We're going to go ahead and start capturing that business, because they were losing money. Amazon's been losing money for a long time, and they were making it up on cloud, on AWS. Now they're starting to make money on products again, but that wasn't the case. The fact that they can raise the fees, and again, if you follow me, my 3 steps for running a business are start up, just get started, scale up, and then step back. And Amazon's been doing that. I wish I could say they listen to me. It's really the other way around. They're brilliant at what they do. But they got started. Bezos took a risk, started out of his garage. You all kind of know the original story with flipping books. That's what he was doing. They've been scaling up like crazy and just trying to buy business. It doesn't matter at what cost, because they're just trying to capture as much of the market as they can. And they've done it. They own roughly 50% of the e-commerce space. That's huge. And maybe they'll get broken up at some point, but that's neither here nor there. Now they're into phase 3, which is to scale back or step back and say, all right, we've done all of our work. We've invested to grow. Now it's time to squeeze some profits. When they squeeze profits, it's going to be at your and my expense. So, they're third-party sellers that they built the platform on. They kind of treat us as they don't care about us anymore. Before, they rolled out the red carpet, made it inexpensive for us to sell on the platform. Now it seems like they're kind of reversing course and saying, you know what? Thanks for helping us grow. Thanks for bumping our stock price. Bezos just stepped down. They've got, a guy running the cloud is going to be stepping in, and great. Now it's time to go make some money and help their shareholders, because that's really where their vested interest lies. They do care about the customers. That's really a piece of it, but it's time to grease the shareholders. So someone says, of course, bite the hands that feed them. Yep, that's kind of what's going on. So they said, hey, and the other piece of the equation is, I really think they hit a point where their warehouses are full. So here's the history lesson. How did we get here? They tried to incentivize FBA sellers to get into it. The way it worked was it's fairly inexpensive. You can have a book sitting in Amazon's warehouse, and your monthly storage fees, what does it cost to sit there, is 1 or 2 cents a month. It's very, very cheap. In fact, way cheaper than probably having your own warehouse. And so it allowed, and I've been preaching for years, just do FBA. You can go on a road trip. You can buy tons of books on the road. We do some library cleanouts, or do, fly to Salt Lake City and buy an individual's library. We can do that, ship everything to Amazon, not even bring a crumb of books back home with us, and wipe our hands and fly back home or drive back home. It's brilliant. I know many of you have lived in an RV and done FBA from the road. It's allowed for some really unique things. And now Amazon's finally saying, you know what? We've worked really hard. We wanted to have everything in our stores. We wanted to make sure that, if a customer came to us, they could find it and find it at a reasonable price. And they finally said, you know what? We've kind of done that. So what has happened over the years was Amazon started instituting, remember, it was the 5,000 unit limit. Of course, I'll tell you a fun story sometime, not tonight. We got other things to discuss. Amazon said, you used to be able to game the system, open a second account, get approval for it, of course, and then send fast moving items to it, slowly get your limits raised. Well, we did that. We had an account that had, a couple 100,000 units that we could send in. So we were set. We could scale for life. Well, then Amazon changed it and said, no, we're going to use this IPI system. And, it's going to be based on that. So it doesn't matter if you had 5,000 units or 100,000 capacity. We're now just going to make it unlimited as long as you sell enough and you're a good seller. And the primary component of that was sell-through rate. We'll come back to that in just a second. So the way Amazon used to do long-term storage fees, it was a good first stab at it. But essentially what they did, Mike says we don't have time for that story. Yeah, I just shared part of it, but it's a longer story. Buy me a beer. I'll tell you the full story. It's great. Essentially what Amazon did is said, hey, we're going to charge long-term storage fees because people are just sending in books. And Amazon even had a single unit exemption, meaning if you had 1,000 books and 990 of them were all unique SKUs, they were all different ASINs or ISBNs, then they weren't going to charge you long-term storage fees ever. They wanted to have one of everything. They were trying to grow the market. Well, at some point, Amazon said, well, that's silly because Caleb is sending in 10,000 books that are all unique. And so he's not paying long-term storage fees. And Reezy's sending in 50,000 books that are all unique, but a lot of them are crossing over. You got all these crazy Venn diagrams going on. And Amazon eventually said, wait a second, hold the phone. People are taking advantage of this. I know a lot of you, I was kind of guilty of it too. You just send everything in. It didn't matter. You could send in 1,000 books ranked over 10 million, which at the time seemed preposterous. But if you're carrying costs on all those books are 1 penny a month, there's really no cost. Why would you care? If you sell one of those books for $20 every month, it pretty much covers the storage fees for everything else. And if you sell, 5 or 6 or 7, even if it's like 0.01% every month, that's some pretty serious money for very little downside. So Amazon eventually removed that, said sellers are gaming the system, which that's what we like to do. So Amazon, kicks us to the curb, and they removed that single unit exemption. Flash forward, they had these long-term storage fees. They said, all right, we're going to charge fees, and they did it every 6 months. So February 15, August 15, which kind of sucked. It was right in the middle of textbook season. But February 15, August 15, they take a snapshot, and everything in your inventory that at that point was 12 months, they eventually added 6 months to the cycle. You would get hit with a long-term storage fee, which was substantial. On a textbook, it could run 25 or 30 cents. On a regular book, it might run 15 cents. And they would hit you with that fee. But you get these massive fees. It would hurt your pocket. People didn't plan ahead and didn't see it coming. And they would just get hit with this massive fee. And then they'd forget about it because they had 6 months off. I won't get charged again. And it really didn't change their behavior. Then people started gaming the system and looked at it and said, wait a second. I can front load all my inventory. Everything I'm going to get in the summer, so like May through August, I'm not going to list it. I'm going to list it, but not send it in. August 16, after the fees get charged, I'll send it in. When February 15 rolls around, it's not 6 months, so I don't get charged with fees. When the next year rolls around, stuff that still hasn't sold, because I'm not playing the game the appropriate way, I'm just sending a shotgun approach. I'm sending everything in. I'm only going to get hit with a 1 year store or 6 month storage, even though it's a year old. So Amazon started getting people that would withdraw a ton of inventory on February 14, Valentine's Day. It's lovely for us. We got, removals. And then they would send a ton of new inventory February 16. Well, you can't even imagine the amount of stress that would cause on the warehouses. So the executives got their heads together and said, wait a second, that's not a good strategy. The sellers have figured out what's going on. And they started charging those fees every month. So the 15th of every month now, we get these long-term storage fees. And so it's a little easier. It's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. The fees are roughly, a 12th of what they were, but you get hit every month. Well, so what? My storage bill on, 15,000 books, give or take, is like $300 or $400 a month. Yippee-doo. I don't really care. So it's not really been effective. And, I say that tongue in cheek. I know I'm part of the problem. I know there's more of you, some of you that are really part of the problem with, tens or hundreds of thousands of books. But imagine Amazon's perspective and put yourself, for those of you that have a small warehouse space, imagine if you got, let's say you do a truckload a week and that's your full capacity. You don't have much more room than that. Well, your local thrift store calls you or doesn't call you and all of a sudden just shows up with 10 truckloads and just dumps them off on your front porch or your warehouse loading dock and says, here you go. Now that's good. Too much of a good thing isn't really a good thing. And that would actually be a really big mess. In fact, if you guys want to have fun, next time they offer free removals, we should all just coordinate, send books to some random person, just see what happens. Maybe a certain address in Des Plaines for those of you who may or may not know what I'm talking about. But that's essentially what's happening. Amazon has this blank check. Most of us have a good enough IPI score to have unlimited inventory. And so literally at any given day, let's say I have 20,000 books in inventory and I come across 5 libraries, I could literally get in there and just shove 100,000 books to Amazon tomorrow. Well, me doing that isn't going to overwhelm the network. Tens of thousands of us, not just booksellers, but every seller, dumping stuff into Amazon overwhelms the warehouses. Well, what happened the last 12 to 15 months? COVID. That was really good for many of us. Of course, it was hard to source for a bit. I know a lot of you had health concerns and family members, and I don't want to, it's a serious thing and I don't want to make fun of it. I know a lot of people went through some really tough situations. That being said, our industry took a really nice bump because people were stuck at home. They learned how to click more than they ever have. And a year ago, e-commerce was roughly 10% of the overall commerce pie in America. It's now pushing 20%. So e-commerce roughly doubled. Well, who gets the lion's share of that? Amazon and all of us. So it's been great. I mean, my sales have been awesome since COVID. I know a lot of you have done very well on e-commerce if you're able to find supply. And I think their warehouses finally got to the point where they said, you know what, we can't just keep taking this inventory. So Amazon up until the last couple of years was really in growth mode. They still are, and that just got hyperized, hyper growth stage in the last year as e-commerce has really doubled quickly. It was going to get there, but it just really brought the next 2 or 3 years forward. So what is Amazon doing about it? Well, it's restock limits. So here's what we don't know. The question is, so roughly what do we do know? For those of you that are jumping in now, let's just recap. Amazon does not want to be a storage center. They want to be a selling center, right? Most Amazon households, as someone here, Facebook user says, most Amazon accounts have a Prime account. They wanted us to fulfill that material, both books and otherwise. Again, most of my content is going to be books. The whole ecosystem is much bigger than books. But what's going on is Amazon said, you know what? We need to have that supply there. We need to be the everything store. Sellers, here's some cheap fees. Come and just stock up books and grocery items and toys and home, everything. We want to have one of everything. We want good prices. We want to compete with Walmart. We want people to come online and be able to get great deals, fair prices, and get stuff quickly. And they have massively succeeded at that. But after they've enticed us to come in, enough of us got in that they eventually said, you know what? Every year we can just start raising the fees. We'll get rid of our 10 to 15% of the weakest customers. There's actually a business strategy here. And more people will come in and replace them. Many booksellers we talk to, they're excited, and then they realize it's actually not just as easy as some of the gurus say. There is actually work involved. And by golly, the stuff doesn't turn into money tomorrow. And so there's a business to be had here, and it takes work and understanding, and there's a learning curve. And enough of you, many of you wash out in the first 3 to 6 months. Those of you who have been in it for over a year, and I recognize a lot of your names on here, kudos. Most small businesses fail within the first year. And that's just because small business is hard and small business is declining. And if you guys know me, I'm very passionate about small business and making sure that, each of us have the tools to grow, whether it's books or Amazon or I don't care. I just there's something about that entrepreneurial spirit. So Amazon got enough of us in there that they finally said, we can keep raising the fees. We can actually start making this a profitable venture instead of just growing it at the expense of Walmart and then eventually making money. Well, eventually is here. The warehouses are stressed. It's time for Amazon to start making money. I don't know if that means you should buy the share. I made some comment on my blog about a year and a half ago when the stock was like $700 or pushing 1,000 for the first time and said, hey, you guys should buy Amazon stock. And some of you said, well, that's you shouldn't be giving stock advice. Well, if we're going to make Amazon wealthy, we should at least capitalize when they raise the fees. So up to you. It's like $2,500 a share now. I haven't seen any draft comments, by the way. So if anybody's watching the draft, you can feel free to comment who some of the first picks are. I haven't even been paying attention, but glad you're here with me. We have over 200 people watching, which is probably the most we've ever had. So I guess there's something good to be said for a crisis. Michael was saying that earlier. Never miss a crisis. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for watching again. We're going to try and provide content to lead and help you understand what's going on here. Someone says go Cowboys, so I don't know who they're getting. But all right, here's what we don't know. Here's some speculation. So again, Amazon has finally raised the fees. They didn't do that yet, although that's probably coming again in the next couple months. The big wrench they threw into the spokes of our bikes at this point was the restock limits. So even if you had unlimited inventory, these restock limits are now kicking in, and we're limited as to what we can send in. If you don't know about that, you need to see it. You can go to Seller Central, click on inventory, and then go down to manage FBA shipments. At the bottom, you will see some comments. You'll be able to see your restock limit. It'll be green if you're good, if you can still send some more books in. It'll be red if you are kind of under that. So some of the things we don't know, I'm going to speculate a bit. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. This is my gut, and from chatting with several of you as well, kind of what we know about Amazon. How often will these restock limits be adjusted? So I guess the first question is will these limits go away? I think the answer is no. Again, they could have changed the inventory limits, the inventory storage, because that's already a system. IPI, they built this whole complicated algorithm to calculate, how good we are as sellers and if we meet certain metrics. And they could have just edited that. Maybe lawyers said no. My hunch is they actually built this on top of the inventory storage limit so that they can either remove it at some point or so that they can adjust it on the fly. So IPI gets adjusted every Monday. That's your inventory performance index. That is how good you are at managing the inventory. And the primary piece, there's lots of pieces to that pie, but the main piece of the pie that matters is your sell-through rate. And that's measured as a percentage of your total inventory that sells each day. Again, Amazon wants to see that north of 2 to 7%. For booksellers, that's not that good. Most good booksellers I've seen are going to be between 1 and 2% daily turn rate for FBA. And if you're struggling, if your IPI is barely sufficient, you're going to be in that 0.5 to 0.8 range, so somewhere south of 1. So IPI gets updated weekly. My hunch, and we don't know yet, we haven't even been out for a week. This got launched a week ago today, is how often will these restock limits be adjusted? As in, if I have 10,000 books in inventory and my limit is now 8,000, what on earth do I do? We'll get to action steps in a minute. My hunch is these limits are going to be updated every week. We'll see. We'll probably learn more on Monday when IPI gets updated. I bet they go hand in hand, like a nice little glove. My hunch is that they're going to be updated weekly. And so that's actually good news. Now, the downside of, especially for those of you, I talked to a lot of you that are doing bulk, and you want to send in 5,000 books and you only have limits, you can only send in 500. So what do? We'll get to the steps in just a second. But I think the good news is, or we're just speculating, my hunch is your limits will adjust as you show that you're continuing to improve your sell-through. That's what Amazon cares about. Remember, Amazon gets paid when stuff sells. They don't really make enough money when it's sitting there in storage. That's not their game. They want to be fulfilling. They want to be finding the customers. So my hunch is weekly. We're going to find out. If I had to make a gamble, I would bet it's every Monday it's going to update. Some other things that are be interesting. What's going to happen to the market? Well, a bunch of you are trying to free up room and make room for inventory because you need to send in more inventory. You've got some slow moving stuff, some cheaper stuff. So we're actually going to see over the short term, we're probably going to see a lot of prices go down. People are going to be chasing that dollar. Amazon kind of likes that. Again, it's just like the real estate paradox. A real estate agent making 3% selling your property isn't really connected. They don't have the same incentives as you. If you have a $500,000 house and they get 3% commission, they're going to make $15,000 if your house sells. You go, yeah, but they have skin in the game, so they're going to try and help me get $520,000 and capture a little extra. Well, on that $20,000 extra, the real estate agent gets 3% of the commission. You get 94% because the other agent gets 3%. They're not really connected to that property like you are. They're incentivized to sell the real estate. And in fact, not in this market, but if someone came in and lowballed you and said $450 and that was your only offer, the real estate agent is going to actually try and talk you into selling it for $450 because they capture their value when the house sells. And sure, they're losing 3% of 50 grand, but they still capture their value. So, I have a lot of friends that are real estate agents. I'm not trying to say you're all are slimy. I'm just saying the incentives aren't lined up. Amazon doesn't really care if I sell a book for $23 versus $19. In fact, they'd rather I sell it for $19 because that customer is happier. The customer then finds it for $19 here instead of $21 at Barnes & Noble, and Amazon gets that customer. And at the end of the day, Amazon cares about the customers. So in the short term, I think we're going to see a little bit of price pressure as people try to reprice more aggressively, try and free up some inventory and work their way through it. So expect some short-term challenges. If you guys want to play the long game, I think long-term prices are going to go up for FBA because there's going to be people that quit. There's going to be people that get, step away or slow down. There's going to be people that aren't able to send in inventory FBA. So I think we're going to see more pressure on the merchant fulfilled side. And I think we might start to see some prices go up on the FBA side. Here's where that gets interesting. Amazon doesn't want expensive books. In fact, if the used buy box gets too high, if the lowest prime price gets too high relative to merchant fulfilled prices, Amazon will actually hide that price and say it's not a fair price. They'll either deactivate it and strand it, saying it's a pricing error, or they will simply hide or shelter that buy box and not make it visible to the buyers. And in that way, they basically squelch the power of you selling FBA. So if that happens and prices go back up, you might be able to capture a short-term win, but that's ultimately not in Amazon's best favor. So my hunch is these restock limits will get updated weekly. I think as we get into Q3 and Q4, and Amazon is rapidly building warehouses. They've got one going down the road in Fort Wayne. They're building several right now. Maybe they get out in front of the capacity and the supply, and maybe they open this back up. Who knows? It's just speculation at this point. So here's what's interesting. How do we move forward? And I got some comments here, but how do we move forward? One, it's really time to start treating this like a business. And many of you are. If you guys have followed my content, I'm very data driven. We've tried to help you build a really strong foundation. I was talking to Bill about this and kind of griping, and Bill Martinlake, and he goes, yeah, we've seen this before. Amazon kind of does this from time to time. They're trying to weed out the chaff and keep the good sellers. And so, if you guys have followed my content, if you guys use ScoutIQ, our tagline is Scout Smarter, not harder. We've tried to give you metrics like eScore and, the ability to make better decisions about what to send in. A lot of you have said, I just only send an inventory on, books ranked under 1 million. Well, so a book that sells once every 6 months, at some point, is going to have a rank under 1 million. Of course, eScore helps you be a little bit smarter there. Hindsight, everybody that really played off that rule of only sending books under 1 million is probably not really caring about these changes because their books sell. So it's time to do an 80-20 analysis. It's time to look at the 80% of your books, the duds, the slow movers that are only generating 20% of your profit. And it's time to be smarter about that. The way the game used to be was just kind of flood the market, be pretty smart with what you're doing, but the margins in books are good enough that you can survive. And it was just kind of a shotgun approach. Anything that turns green, send it in. Don't really think twice about it. As long as enough of them sell, you'll make some money, and that's going to be great. The way the game's going to work now is you really need to run your business like a business. You need to be cautious about what you're sending in. Again, we had the 100 book challenge. If you guys are brand new, you can check it out, the 100bookchallenge.com. And then just the numbers 100bookchallenge.com. That was my challenge as an entrepreneur. I had a corporate job and I wanted to quit. And so I said, if I find 100 books a week, what does that look like over the long run? You can follow my story. You can follow John Troutman's story, Matthew Osborne's story. It's pretty interesting. So that's not necessarily the game anymore. It's not just sending in 100 random books. If your inventory, especially if you're brand new, is limited to 1,000 books, you need to send in the right 1,000 books. So it's really about being efficient. It's about kind of dropping some of the lower priced books. Even if you can make $1, doesn't mean you should do it. There's some really good, obviously, companies like Sell Back Your Book, Zifit. You can look at Book Scouter. There's a lot of companies out there, and Sellback is featured on our app. They do a phenomenal job. They're going to buy back your books. A lot of books you could sell on Amazon and make $1.50, and they're going to offer you 85 cents. You should probably start sending more of your books that way. Now, we do get a kickback on that, of course, so I am a little biased towards that. However, if you're only going to make 60, 70 cents over and above what you have a guaranteed price for, you might not want to tie up some of your inventory in those books. You might want to start looking for books that are going to be up in the neighborhood of, we'll get to eScores in just a minute, but you might want to start looking at books that have better ranks that are going to turn. Again, Amazon wants us, they've told us, based on what we're reverse engineering on the restock limits, they want us to carry about 3 months worth of inventory. So if that's the way the game's going to be played, we need to be factoring that into our triggers. So what do the triggers look like? Well, something that's going to sell every 3 months is going to have an eScore of 2. eScore is something that's going to roll, eScore is the number of days that a book is sold in the last 6 months. So if a book is sold one time, one copy essentially, we don't know how many copies sell any given day. We just know if the rank drops, there's at least one sale. So if a book is sold one time in 6 months, it's got an eScore of 1. It's likely to sell again in the next 3 to 9 months, give or take. We don't know for sure, but that's past performance. eScore of 2 actually means it's selling every 3 months. And so it's likely to sell between 1.5 and 4.5 months, give or take, again, assuming that past trends hold true. So theoretically, anything with an eScore of 2, you could still send in. However, if you send in only books, if your entire inventory of 1,000 books, if you're a new seller and that's your limits, if you send in 1,000 books to have an e-score of 2, you're not going to sell enough of those, and they're just going to sit there. And your storage limits at some point, it's at 1,000, but Amazon could lower that. Now you might go down to 900, 800, 500. Now you're really going to be stuck. So what do you want to do? Let's say you're sitting there as a smaller player. Maybe you just started or started in the last year. You're still under 1,000 books in inventory and your restock limit's 1,000. What are you going to do to grow that? Well, Amazon is saying, look, send in books that sell quickly. So you're going to have to send in a lot of books. It doesn't mean you need to send in books only that have an e-score of 50 or 100. An e-score of 6 is selling once a month. Some of those are still going to sell. Now, you may want to merchant fulfill some of those. The trick is, just like, we gamed it to try and get our inventory limits up from the original goals of 5,000 several years back. You need to be sending in books that sell quickly so that over, your running average, your weighted average over the last, I think it's going to be 90 days roughly, slowly goes up. As Amazon sees that velocity rise, they're going to say, hey, kudos to you. We're going to raise your restock limits, we think. Again, that's conjecture. I bet they update every week, maybe every quarter, but I bet it's going to be weekly. So you need to start treating your inventory very carefully. You don't want to send in 1,000 books that are only going to make you $1 because that's not going to get the job done. You need to be sending in stuff that's going to help, put real food on the table and actually do that very well. I think a piece of this is going to be freeing up space. We're working on a quick little software tool. If you guys want to look, I've got plenty of information on removals. If you want to type inventory quadrants or inventory health quadrant analysis, you can do that and just look up that on Gumroad. You'll find a free spreadsheet I put together. You can actually upload your inventory health report. We're going to make a little software piece just to kind of help you guys out. But if you want to jump in now, you can see we break it down into the studs, the duds, the long tail, and your bread and butter inventory. So that can help you free up some space. So if let's say you have 5,000 books in inventory and your limit is 4,500, you need to clear out some of your duds. So the quickest way to do that is inventory health report. We'll share some videos in our Facebook group. We'll kind of get into more of that in the specifics. But you want to look at long tail stuff that's been sitting there a long time, that's not very expensive. You want to look at even more recent stuff that's only going to net you, 50 cents after all the fees are factored in. You want to yank those. You want to free up room for books that are going to make you good money. We've been spoiled in that we didn't have to be very good inventory managers. We could just go find books, shove them all to Amazon and let stuff sell eventually. And eventually is no longer going to cut it. You really need to be pricing aggressively. So step one is take a hard look in the mirror and figure out, what we need to change on the triggers so that we can kind of fix this moving forward. We'll start sharing more of those specifics in the groups as well. If you're not joining the Book Flipper Facebook community, do that. We'll send some content out through our email list as well. So you can sign up for that at scoutiq.co. We'll put out some YouTube content as well. So adjust your triggers. Look in the mirror, figure out, what your business really needs to be doing moving forward. Free up space as needed. That's going to be disposals. You could remove it, get it shipped back to you. If you want the books, they're probably not worth it that much. And then here's where it starts to get interesting. I really think that, and again, I've been preaching this for a long time on the FBA front. When COVID settled in March of last year, Amazon hit the pause button on FBA. They said, we're only going to let essential items in. They knew that their warehouses were getting flooded. So they said, pump the brakes on FBA. I looked at that and said, that might be a week. It might be a month. It might be a year. And I immediately converted every book I had waiting to go to FBA. I converted it to merchant fulfilled. And you guys, I've got some videos on that. You can search my channel, the Book Flipper community. You can just search Book Flipper and merchant fulfilled or MF operation or MF whatever books. You'll see some videos on how I set up my shelves, the software I'm using to do it, and how I go find those books and ship them. It's actually very, very straightforward. So I think another step after adjusting your triggers, freeing up space, and really, setting better scouting parameters is going to be starting to merchant fulfill some of your inventory. That's going to be a big step forward. Now, Amazon's not going to like it. This is kind of how we can fight back in some ways, is once you start merchant fulfilling, it's pretty easy to start cross-platform fulfilling, meaning you can list your books on eBay. You can list them on Amazon, Alibris, Abe, Facebook Marketplace. You can start getting into some of these other websites. Now, if Amazon starts losing some of that market share, I don't know, they might, feel defensive and start opening back up some of their network. Who knows? They might slack off the restock fees. Maybe that's wishful thinking. But once you guys start flexing the muscle, and I'll show you, about a third of my business right now is merchant fulfilled. I've got a little warehouse here in Indiana. I've got a great warehouse manager. shout out to Caleb. I only hire Caleb's for some reason, but shout out to Caleb for doing a great job managing that while I'm, running software and traveling and frankly, golfing and drinking a lot of coffee and other beverages. Caleb does a great job doing that. In my business, I'm going to adjust my triggers. I'm going to probably flip-flop, and probably 2/3 of my books are going to go to merchant fulfilled, and probably a third are going to go back to merchant fulfilled. So, and I think then diversifying and saying, hey, I don't want to have all my eggs in Amazon's basket. They are a very fickle mistress. When they're great, they're amazing. And when they're bad, it's brutal. And I've talked to a lot of you that have been pretty down, and I get it. I'm still trying to make sense of all this. But again, we're in this together. Books aren't going anywhere. And we just have to, we've built a good foundation. We've tried to run a smart business, and it's just trying to be even smarter and make sure that we're running effective businesses. So we're going to help you guys. We're going to make some subtle changes to the ScoutIQ triggers. We'll get into that. We'll share that in our groups as well. We're going to make sure that you have all the tools, both educationally and on the software side, to make sure that you can run effective businesses. So diversifying, Accelerlist has some pretty cool software that helps you cross-list into eBay. I think Joe Lister does some of it, but they haven't updated or innovated in a while. So you can check out Accelerlist. They'll help you cross-list your books. There are some extra fees to list into eBay, but once you sell a book, the fees there are still cheaper. Shh, don't tell anybody. So there is actually a lot of books being sold on eBay. That might be an option for you to invest. And someone said they had to poke the bear. Make sure you invest in better shelves than Caleb did. The shelves were great. My engineering skills in assembling the shelves was not so great. So if you guys didn't see that, go check out my Instagram at the Book Flipper. I lost an entire row of 9 3-foot bays that dominoed over thanks to gravity and science. So I've learned my lesson. And I think here's kind of a comment. So I don't know what school of thought you're all in, but I think it's really important. I wish I had this up on the screen, but it's really important right now that you guys figure out, if that'll work, figure out who you are. There's a lot of you that are hobbyists. This is kind of a fun adventure. You enjoy the thrill of the hunt. It's awesome to go out, twice a month and go find some books at a thrift store or on a lunch break. That's great. Or you go to garage sale season and just scoop up some books and flip them on Amazon and make a couple bucks and, help pay for some of your hobbies or maybe a vacation. And you might make a couple hundred, maybe $1,000 a month. And that's great. The good news is right now, Amazon's saying you can still have up to 1,000 books in inventory. And as long as that holds true, those of you that are hobbyists can still continue to do just that. Now, be careful, because if you just keep sending in junk, eventually you're going to exacerbate the problem, and maybe this continues. So as hobbyists, if you don't really want to be a big time seller and you're just happy with up to 1,000 books in inventory, be a little bit smarter about what you send in. And I think you can still continue on business as usual. And I don't think Amazon's going to take the fun of this game away. The fees are going to continue to go up, of course, but at this point, you can still know what you're doing. So I think we're going to see a lot of hobbyists, and I don't think you're going to be impacted too much. If you do decide to start growing, you're going to have to start showing Amazon that you care, showing that you care about your turn rate. That means investing in a proper repricer, making sure that you can turn those books fast enough and that you're sending the right books in. And I think you're going to see, so on one hand, you're going to see the hobbyists, and then on the other end, you're going to have these professionals that are people that have, 10 or 20 or 30 or 50,000 books in inventory, and they're going to be able to pivot. They have a team, they have a warehouse. They're going to be able to merchant fulfill as needed and kind of figure that out. What's going to struggle, and it's also, I'm not going to make political statements, but I will anyway. The middle class is going to somewhat get beat up here, and the middle class is going to somewhat evaporate. If you're stuck in the middle, if you got a couple thousand books in inventory, you're maybe a baby bulk operation, you've been working out of a storage unit, you've got 3,000 to 5,000 to 10,000 books in inventory, and your goal was eventually to get that warehouse and ramp up, Amazon is not going to let you just continue to pump FBA material in. I'm hoping the restock limits update every week, but at this point, we don't know that for sure. And if you were just getting ready to continue ramping and you wanted to do bulk with only FBA, that's going to be a little bit of a struggle. If that's you, we do have some specific tools for you. If you want to reach out, Caleb at thebookflipper.com, just drop me an email and say, hey, I'm a baby bulk player. What do you got for me? We've got some pretty cool ways that you monetize your books, even outside of Amazon. It's not for everybody. If you're a hobbyist, that's not going to be for you, but by all means, reach out and we'd love to help. So I think the middle class, I think you guys are going to have to look in the mirror, guys and gals, and figure out, is this a hobby for me? Am I happy just to have a limit of 1,000 books and just kind of enjoy looking for books? Or am I going to go and really ramp this up and be a professional seller and pivot and really start acting smartly and making really good decisions? Am I going to be a pro? So I think the middle class, the muddy middle, is going to be difficult to live. We'll see over time. Again, we're just trying to figure this out. But I think it's important to understand who you are. Or do you want to be a hobbyist, or do you want to be a professional? And with that, I conclude my State of the Union address. Romer says, am I a hobbyist yet? Romer, yes, you've succeeded. You're still traveling. You're still dancing salsa all the time. So I guess it's a hobby, but I know you treat it like a business. All right. We're going to take some questions. It's been an hour. My voice is going. We still have over 200 of you on here. I hope that was helpful. If it was, leave a thumbs up, give me a +1, subscribe, all those fun things. Share this in some other groups as well. Again, not trying to steer you towards software. Obviously, my business can be very much affected, not only the book business, but the software business. So, I'm just trying to just say it like it is. I'm trying to lead. I'm trying to help pave the way forward. And guys, this is a cool community. I've said this a lot, but I used to work in orthopedics, hip and knee replacements, and the community was very brutal toward each other. It was very much secretive, and they're the enemy, and they're the enemy. We can't be friendly. And it was very much like, we're going to get our business at their expense. It was kind of a zero-sum game. I love the book community outside of a couple of you, just kidding. But for the most part, we're all technically competitors. But at the end of the day, we can take our boxing gloves off and sing Kumbaya and really help each other. So I learn a ton from each of you. I know that sometimes I'm the leader or a leader and kind of helping guide everybody forward. But I'm doing that because of all the conversations I'm having. I'm learning probably more from you than you are from me. So keep those going. I really appreciate all of you. This is an awesome community. All right, that's it for our love session. I'm going to take some questions here. Again, this will be available for replay if you weren't able to catch all of it. Hopefully that gives you a good idea. Rob was asking me for the Cliff Notes earlier. So Rob, thanks for sticking on and watching this. Maybe we can, push our call till next month, like, we tend to do anyway. But the Cliff Notes of this are: Amazon wants to be selling books, not storing them. They're making that incredibly obvious at this point. There's restock limits in place. It seems to be tied to whatever units you've sold in the last 3 months, last 3 to 4 months. That's kind of what your inventory restock limits are. Restock limits supersede your inventory limit. So even if you have unlimited inventory, there's now restock limits in place. And I bet, this is speculation, that they're going to update them every Monday. And those of you that want to slowly grow your business the right way and send in good inventory, good for you. Amazon probably will reward that. For those of you that don't, you're probably going to be stuck in a shrinking inventory situation or getting closer to 1,000. How do you fight back? Start listing better inventory. We're going to walk you through how to do that with triggers in future videos in our Facebook group over email. So start sending in better stuff to FBA. If you don't want to do merchant fulfilled, that's okay too. Just understand you're going to have some ceilings, you're going to have some limits. And you need to really make sure you're repricing your inventory so it sells, so it frees up more room for more inventory. So if you're not doing it regularly, go look at your IPI, but drill down into the inventory dashboard. And the main metric, and if we learn otherwise, we'll let you know. The main metric that matters is going to be sell-through rate. And as a bookseller, you really want to get that north of 1.0, ideally closer to 1.2, 1.5, because that's going to show Amazon that you're selling inventory. All right, if you guys have questions, gals have questions, comment below. I'm going to stick around and answer a few more. I appreciate your time. For those of you that want to get back to the NFL draft, go Lions. I guess I'm a Colts guy too and a Broncos guy forever because I live there, but go Lions. We'll see if we can get out of mediocrity at some point. But if you have questions, by all means, comment and we'll jump in there. This is not a question, but screw Jensen Books. Hey, they're nice people, but yeah, that's going to hurt. They're primarily FBA. I bet their churn rate's high because they price aggressively. So who knows? I don't know if they're affected. Jensen Books, if you're watching, love to hear what's going on in your world. Bradley Morgan, this is funny and true. I think there's going to be a Netflix documentary someday about the book flipping world. Netflix, if you're watching, Netflix, Papa Netflix, Mama Netflix, if you're watching, reach out. There's some really cool people in this space. There's a couple villains. You know who you are, Romer. Just kidding. But there's some interesting people in this space that never ceases to amaze me. And I think Netflix would really enjoy seeing what goes on behind the scenes. Other comments, what do we got? Heck V37, I think California, if I remember right, says, what e-score do you think is best to send to Amazon? I don't think you should be sending in really long tail items anymore. I don't know where that cutoff is. I used to like sending long tail books to Amazon because if there's only 4 copies of a book out there and all 4 of them are merchant fulfilled and I add a 5th to the market, I love being the only prime seller. And I know lots of you that feel the same way. The next buyer that comes along, we get the buy box as the lowest prime price typically. We can charge a couple bucks more, $1 more, a couple bucks, whatever you want. And you can essentially get the next sale, even if it only happens once every 6 months. I don't think you should be doing that. I think you should have a nice shelf, even if you don't want to have a huge shelf in your house or fill your basement or your garage. I think you should have a nice long tail shelf of expensive books and throw anything with an e-score of 0, 1, 2, 3 maybe on that shelf. I think you can send in stuff with e-scores of 4, 5, 6. You're just gonna have to reprice aggressively. John says, thanks for taking the time to give your 2 cents. You're very welcome. It used to be penny books. Now with all the money in circulation, they are 2-cent books. So you got it. I'm gonna throw some other comments up and just kind of do this on the fly. Looks like people that are under half a year into their journey and no IPI score are exempt from storage limits. Hopefully that's true. If that's you, don't just flood it with trash. Understand that your storage limits, when they do come into play, looks like the floor is gonna be 1,000 units. And if you're selling more than that, then it's gonna ramp up. So again, I think Amazon wants us to keep selling. They don't just want to cut us off to make a ton of money from us. So I think slow and steady and moving forward smartly is going to be the right path. So if you are brand new and don't have these limits, don't just rest easy. It's not going to last forever. So be careful. Is the restock limit based on how many different ASINs you have? Meaning, couldn't I still send in thousands of the same product like wholesale or private label? I don't believe so. I think it's just tied to the storage class. I think it's units. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Looks like Avery just gave me $9.99 as a super sticker. Sweet. Thanks, Romer. I didn't know you could do that. If you guys want to throw some money in my tip jar, that's cool, but happy to provide these. Miguel says, thanks. Logan says, thanks, Caleb. Lots of good information. Michael Hill. What do we got? We got through draft action. Some questions about ScoutIQ, adding some different triggers. Yep, we're going to be doing some of that. Chad Coleman says, I'm MFing. For those of you that don't know, that means merchant fulfilling 6 e-score and lower, unless there's no other prime offers. So you can start getting some fancy in that case. Do you think the amount of booksellers will decrease because of this? Probably. I know some people are already dropping out. Anytime there is changes or there are changes, people are going to get panicky and say, you know what? I've had enough dealing with Amazon. It's already not been fun, and this is just the last straw. So yeah, I think we're going to see a downturn a bit. Certainly we're going to see a downturn in inventory, and it's going to move more to merchant fulfilled, or it's going to go elsewhere. It's going to go onto eBay or down the food chain to Zipit or sell back your book. So I think it will hurt the market in the short term. We'll see what happens there as well. Mike says, no, it's total units. It's poorly worded. So yeah, it's units. And the idea is you can't send in 1,000 pair of sunglasses as private label. Guys, here's an interesting theory. I don't know if this would work as well for everybody. I think it's worth finding a fast-moving product that's light, and you can fit like 100 of them in one box. Something small and light, maybe a grocery item, maybe an office item. This is an interesting strategy. If you want to show Amazon that you're selling a lot, I don't think they're going to break out the parameters by category. So let's say your limit's 5,000, you're sitting at 4,000. I think you should actually consider, and this might be something worth trying. I'd be happy to help someone do this. I think it's worth finding a light item that's small that you can fit a ton in one box. And as you're shipping boxes to Amazon, seed the top of those boxes with these items. So find one, like sticky notes, for example, that sells just tons of items, maybe not sticky notes because they're heavy, but find something light and that sells really fast and ideally makes you a little bit of money. You don't want to lose money on this, but you could send in 800 books. And on top of that pallet, you could throw one box that's really light that fits 100 of another item and fill that in. If those items sell really quickly, that's going to bump up your sell-through rate, which is actually going to help Amazon say, hey, that's a good seller. We're going to reward them with higher restock limits. So for those of you that really want to keep growing, I think it's worth doing. I think there's some good grocery items that would work, some replenishables, items that people are going to buy a lot of that aren't going to be expensive or heavy. You can buy them for, $1 or $2 and maybe make 10 cents, 50 cents, $1 on it. Ideally make some money for the headache. But I think you might be able to game the algorithm and sell those items. So every time you send in a box, put a couple of them on top of the books to help. Every time you send in a pallet for the bigger players, I think throw a box or two on top, and you're going to steal some of your units, but it's going to sell quickly enough if you can find items that might sell, 25 to 50 items a day. And there's lots of those items out there. Even if they're low margin, it doesn't matter. You're trying to play the game where you can ramp up your inventory. So that might be worth considering as well. BDM55 says, hey, Caleb. Hey, if there's a question, let me know. Someone else says, are we going to be adjusting the triggers? Yeah, we've got a lot of stake in the play as well. Does Zifit accept library? They do not. You can check out Zifit's criteria on their website. Of course, it's World of Books in the UK, but you can go to zifit.com and you can see what they're going to do as well. Someone asked if merchant fulfilled metrics affect your restock limits. No, they don't. So Mike, you're absolutely right. MF metrics do not matter towards this. So if you're going to send in some items and try and play that game where you want to send in grocery items that sell quickly, you can't merchant fulfill those. That's not going to help your metrics. You need to be doing some FBA as well. Miss Joanna from Canada says, there it is. I was waiting for that answer. So perfect. Wayne says, great idea. You tell me the rules. I'll tell you how to play the game. Yeah, unfortunately, this is very much like Amazon. They didn't announce this in advance. They didn't give us 2 weeks or 2 months head start notice. They didn't even tell us what the rules are. Is this going to adjust weekly? We don't know. They just said, hey, you got evicted. Put all your stuff outside. And if you haven't been selling enough, even though your IPI is good, sorry, we're going to be out. Here's an interesting proposal. I've heard several of you asking this. Would there be any services out there to let you store your MF inventory and ship it on your behalf, essentially fulfilled by Amazon, but somebody else? Well, Nathaniel, why don't you do it? You could do fulfillment by Nathan, FBN, or FBH, fulfillment by Herod. I think there's going to be some interesting people. So Nathan, talk to me. There's several other of you crazy cats out there that have actually pitched this idea. And if we could find a bunch of trustworthy people, again, there's some crazy cats in this industry, so we got to be careful. It'd be really interesting to spread this out and actually find ways for us to all kind of partner up, maybe become a thrift books of sorts where all of us kind of gang up or team forces. That'd be interesting. I'd love to chat with some of you. I've had a couple people call and say, hey, maybe here's an idea. So who knows? That might be something to do. That's going to be a tall order, but where there's a will, there's a way. Manny says, will there be a free removal period coming up? I doubt it. If they change the inventory limits, their lawyers probably would have said yes. Because they called this a restock limit, they probably get some out of that. I don't see them offering it. Although Canadian friends, you guys had something like this happen maybe a month or two ago. And I think you, did get restock or free removal. So maybe if they do, take advantage. Don't dispose of it if it's free. Get it shipped back because you get all that packing material. And if you don't want it, there's some friendly people in Displays that would love to have it. David says, Zifit has definitely accepted my library books. Sweet. I don't think they say it in their rules that they do, but that would be awesome if they do it. Amy says, when are you moving back to Colorado? I don't think anytime soon, but I'll come visit. We'll go back to a diner and we'll have some good time sourcing with you and your husband. That was a lot of fun. What other comments do you guys have? I'll stick around just for a couple minutes as well. Miss Johanna says, let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. Mike McCarty, not to be confused with the Packers coach. How do you think inventory age will play into future storage limits? Should we remove sooner and keep inventory fresh? I think it's literally just sell-through rate. We don't know all of Amazon's metrics that they look at, but sell-through rate is units sold today divided by total inventory. So if you have 1,000 books in inventory and sell 10, I don't think Amazon's looking at, which 10 did you sell? Are they recent books? Are they old books? Are they middle of the market books? They don't care. 10 divided by 1,000, check by math, is 1%. You got 1.0% sell-through rate today. I think that's all they're really doing. Now, the way to sell books faster is to send in fresh inventory that is, good e-scores that's going to sell well as well. Woolridge Books, Rusty and Luana, what's up, you guys? Could a coup of MF sellers possibly work? Who knows? We'll find out. That's going to be interesting. May have to change our name to the Underground Society of Ninja Book Flippers or something. David says, do you think we can still ship in open shipments if we're already over the limits? I don't believe so. I believe if you've already closed the shipment and said it was shipping, even if it didn't ship, I think you're okay. They will take it. At least they haven't said they won't. What's also missing from this equation is if you are over your limits, are there any fees or taxes or penalties? I just think they stop your ability to send in new inventory. So if you have already closed that batch, David, by all means, try and send it in, kick it in. Worst case, they refuse it, ship it back. They're not going to eat it or destroy it. So try that. That may be worth it doing as well. McCarthy's the Cowboys coach. Yeah, I'm a little behind. I've been a little focused on books as well. Action Taker says, when's the next book meetup? Well, again, not to get political, but now that COVID is starting to at least slowly settle down and subside and everybody's getting shots and vaccines, or you're not getting vaccines, whatever the case may be, we're going to start some meetups again. So there's going to be, we had like 4 or 5 planned last year and of course canceled all but the first because the first happened in February before all of this ish hit the fan. We will definitely get those going again when we feel like it's a little safer to be going as well. Amy says, if you do have a repricing software, how often do you run it? Do you have it run multiple times a day? Lots of schools of thought. I'm more in the repositioner thought. I think it's worth repositioning your inventory once or twice a week and letting the prices bounce back up to you. That's just my philosophy. If you're going to do repricing, reprice it. A lot of people use it. It's based on, you can set it to run 3 or 5 or 10 times a day. If you're going to do repricing, you need to bring the right tools to the game. And if you're going to do it, you either need to reposition and do it once or twice a week, or maybe once a day, or you need to do a software that's going to do it instantaneously. I think like a Be Cool, App Eagle, they might have been called before. You're going to want to get some more firepower as well. Bob says, Caleb, do you expect buyback companies, secondhand stores will get overwhelmed and take less inventory and offer less as well? Potentially. I think Sell Back Your Book has been positioning themselves in this space for a while. Maybe they knew something we didn't, that this was coming. The bigger companies, Sell Back Your Book, Thrift Books, Discover Books, Better World Books, they are not FBA, they're merchant fulfilled. So they will relatively be unaffected by this change. They may want to buy more of our inventory because they're happy making 50 cents, but we probably shouldn't be sending inventory in to make 50 cents. So I think several of these people, these companies are actually set up to do really well. Will they get overwhelmed? I don't know. Every time I see Bill, he just keeps doing this and says, shovel inventory my way. So let's test that theory. They haven't said no yet. They did slow down a bit with COVID, but they weren't turning inventory away. Diane says, I was over inventory, I'm guessing, when it was just volume and never got charged. I just had to wait to send in new inventory. So I don't think you're going to get taxed or charged if you're over the limits. Nick Yomi, hot take, says, I think books overall will be less profitable this year because competition will stiffen on eBay. I think Amazon is basically saying we don't want you as sellers. And so they're going to push some of the people to eBay for sure. And obviously FBA prices will decline because of aggressive repricing. I do agree with that, although I think over time, if people can't send a lot of inventory in, then the supply demand economics go the other way. Although if we're all just fighting over each other like Hunger Games, maybe prices will be perpetually lower on FBA, or we'll find out. Is that a toupee? Sorry, I need a smile after the news. No, it's real. It's just gel. Sorry, I'm not getting that old yet. Interesting. Matt Adolph says he's got a good inside scoop here. He says Better World's put a freeze on new inventory. Matt, when did that happen? Is that recent? Is that related to this as well? So that'll be curious. Greg says, do you think the limit will go up from 1 on Sell Back Your Book, that you can only send 1 of every book to them? I don't think so. Although if you are part of the bulk program, that's going to be, you can send more than 1 at a time. So by all means, check out their bulk program. You can go to scoutiq.co/bulk, BULK, and check that out as well. Just a couple more and then we'll wind this down. John again says, what do you think about sending a 10 eScore book to FBA, or should that be MF? That's going to be the question that we all kind of have to answer. Probably depends on the level of competition on the listing. If you're going to be the only FBA seller on a 10 eScore book, meaning it's selling almost twice a month, then by all means, you could probably send that to FBA and be just fine. I think what we want to be doing is making sure that a good chunk of our inventory, not all of it needs to sell in 3 months, but historically we've been saying, well, 50% of your inventory should sell in 3 months. Amazon's kind of pushing us and saying you really need to get that closer to most of your inventory is selling every 3 months, or on average, it's selling every 3 months. So a 10 eScore by all means could go FBA. I think you want to start cutting that off probably down in the lower range, probably in the 6 to lower range is probably where you start going, let's do more merchant fulfilled. Do you think this has to do with anything with Amazon's new cross-posting option to list on any other marketplace? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Bluegrass Books. Care to elaborate? I know some, they'll let you cross list or cross fulfill from FBA, but that's kind of been the case before. I think they've made some subtle changes there. Romer says, do you think this will make FBA prices go up? Less supply, same demand equals higher FBA prices, right? Yes, with the caveat that if everybody continues to fight after turn rates, and that's the new game that we're playing, it's going to be Hunger Games where we fight for low prices. So I think short term is lower prices. Middle term is going to be slightly inflated as people kind of wait and see what's going on. And then we'll kind of see where equilibrium settles. Rest assured, if FBA prices settle too high, Amazon's going to change something to make sure those prices come back down. Caleb and Matt, libraries around here have been given the okay to send everything in. So that's great. So libraries aren't really slowing down. Romer says, let's invest in crypto. Maybe. Curious about this cross-posting thing. We'll get to that later. Mike says, last question, and we'll wrap this up. Mike, thanks for watching. Talk about the future of the FBA bump. So the FBA bump right now, really the sole reason it exists, and there's really not much of an FBA bump in the UK because there's no buy box in the UK. There's no used buy box. The governing authorities in the UK, the regulatory authorities said that's not fair to feature one offer, especially if it's more expensive because prime is usually more expensive than non-prime. So there's not much of an FBA bump in the UK because it doesn't get featured in the buy box. The main reason there's an FBA bump where people pay more for prime is because prime 9.5 times out of 10 wins the buy box compared to merchant fulfilled. If Amazon were to change that algorithm overnight and actually start featuring quality sellers, regardless of whether they're merchant fulfilled or FBA, then that bump will probably start to go away because the big players, Discover, Thrift, Better World Books, Sell Back Your Book even, are going to start dropping prices, or they're already down there. And if they can win the buy box ahead of prime sellers, that's going to be the biggest blow to prime sellers. So that's a thought as well. Diane says Amazon came out today with new fee structure for multi-channel fulfillment. And then a vague mention that what percentage of our inventory is merchant or multi-channel fulfillment would be part of our IPI. So maybe Amazon wants us to sell multi-channel. They don't care as long as they're fulfilling, maybe, or maybe that hurts us. Who knows? Typical Amazon to not really know what's going on. So guys, that's it from today. There's going to be a lot more conversations to come. This is not just a 1 hour session. There's still almost 200 of you, 180 of you on here. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I'm going to stop fielding questions at this point, but I do appreciate all of you. Let's keep the conversations going. We're going to try and do this every week or every other week in the short term. We're going to be pushing out some new triggers. We're going to give more information on how to set that. We're going to give more information on merchant fulfilled as well, because that's something that I have not been sharing a ton of information. It's somewhat newer as well. Someone says they think the cord is the cord on the phone. I'm not that old school, guys. So anyway, Michael, appreciate you as well. Michael Hill, Mike Kreider, all the Michaels out there. So guys, gals, thanks for your time. I'm going to sign off. So from Indiana, we say good night, and we wrap up our State of the Union address. If you want to follow along and check out more, make sure you subscribe. We'll be posting more content on YouTube later, and we'll be posting these on Facebook and emailing. We're going to be making sure we communicate a lot over the coming weeks and months, and we're going to figure it out. Every time there's challenges, there's opportunities as well. It's just a matter of knowing where to look. And maybe some of our business goes away from Amazon. That would probably be a healthy thing, and we're going to figure it out as well. So thanks. Have a good night, everybody.